Welcome everybody. I hope you've been enjoying the program so far. Thank you for coming. So I wanted to introduce our first paper from Ambidio. This is Hsieh and Steve Morris. Pei is the founder of Ambidio. He has earned his master's degree in electrical engineering from Columbia University, and he's done research at Weta Digital, Disney Research in Zurich, and the University of Southern California. Steve is Director of Engineering at Skywalker Sound and is a 30-year veteran in the audio engineering industry. He has worked on designing facilities in every facet of the media business, including music, film, video post-production, as well as broadcast television. So welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So my name is Pei-Lun Hsieh. I'm the co-founder of Ambidio. Today we'll switch gear and show a little bit of care for the audience outside of the cinema. We will introduce you Ambidio, an immersive stereo format that is directly created by the mixer and can be reproduced by the audience outside of the cinema. And we will show you how both the trained audio professionals and the people without experiences in audio feel about Ambidio. And we will show you how artists create Ambidio with very little change in their production workflow. We will also show you what are the impact on the workflow, the transmission, and the reproduction of an Ambidio soundtrack. And Steve is a director of engineering from Skywalker Sound. He will talk about how they integrate with the Ambidio soundtrack creation into their workflow, and as one of the audio deliverables. So let's take a look about how we've been creating sound for film and TV. Since Dolby Stereo was introduced in Star Wars, we have been adding surround channels to make the sound more enveloping. And these multi-channel format like 5.1 and 7.1 are still most common configuration for theatrical viewing. And a few years ago, next generation audio was introduced with the release of Pixar's Brave to add another level of sound experience for the audience. And since then, it has become more common to produce the immersive sound experience for the cinema, especially for the premium titles showing in premium theaters. But how do the audience watch the content we created outside of the cinema? We've talked to multiple platforms that stream different signals based on the internet quality and the type of devices that are receiving the signal. The result is not ideal. The majority of the soundtracks being transmitted to the end user is actually in stereo format. And the primary reason of this is the bandwidth. And because people are watching content on these devices. Yes, TVs, laptops, tablets, and mobile phones. And do you know what these devices have in common? They all have stereo speakers. And the sound stage coming from the stereo speakers usually limited by the span of the left and right speakers. Instead of coming from around you, like in a multi-channel format as the content creators intended. This is very natural for the people to sacrifice quality over convenience. So a more important problem for us is that how we can provide a better sound experience directly to the audience on these devices. So that's why we would like to introduce Ambidio, a immersive version of stereo format that we created. We want Ambidio to break the stereo sound stage, and you can hear the sound not just coming from the front, but also from the surround speaker are coming. And we want it to be as easy to adopt as possible, both for the content creators and the audience. So first of all, the surround information is added by the mixer directly in post-production. And we will later introduce the authoring tool for creating Ambidio soundtracks. And we work very closely with experienced sound engineers to make sure the changing post-production workflow are as little as possible. And while having the flexibility for them to put their creative decision into the mix. And for consumption and distribution, since we are using stereo bit stream to carry the Ambidio soundtrack to the audience directly. And so there's no change needed in the transmission, and the audience don't have to install any software or hardware to listen to Ambidio. And since Ambidio uses stereo bit stream for transmission and stereo speakers for reproduction, it will be easy to adopt. The distribution platform can simply take the Ambidio 2-channel audio file that was created by the mixers and plug it into a stereo pipeline. And without adding any extra overhead, you can deliver the creative intent to the audience's ears. For example, if we upload a video with Ambidio sound to, let's say, YouTube, then tens of millions of daily users on YouTube will be able to access the creative intent that Mixer just created on the devices the audience use every day. So let's see how people feel about the sound field that Ambidio creates through stereo speakers. We did a series of subjective listening tests to evaluate how Ambidio performs in creating an immersive sound field and maintaining the creative intent of the original mix. So the first test, we conduct the test in a professional sound room to have the test subject to compare 5.1 and stereo and Ambidio version of the same clips. We asked professional re-recording mixers to create 10 clips, and all of them are under 1 minute, and with a variety of scenes, like dialogue-driven ones, music-driven ones. Both Ambidio and stereo versions are created out of a 5.1 master. And to make the test completely blind, the order of the clips are randomized, and the formats are also randomized. And this is the photo of the test setup. The test subject will be asked to sit in the center of the room, and within the 30-minute session, each subject will listen to as many as 10 clips at their own pace, so they don't have to finish all the 10 clips within the 30 minutes. But on average, the subjects usually end up finishing about 6 to 7 clips. And for each clip, they can switch between the 3 different versions while the video keeps playing by pressing the solo button on the console. And for each clip, the subjects are asked to rate all the format based on the 4 attributes. And we provide the definition of these 2 attributes before the test. So the first one is envelopment and immersiveness, which means reverberance, depth of sound field, watch of the side, and surround information. And the second one is the anchor center dialogue, which means the localization of the center channel, the depth of the dialogue compared to left and right, and believable dialogue position. The third one is off-screen sound source definition or surround sound quality. It means the crisp and distinct sound located in the surround field, and whether the off-screen sound is easily located. And the last one is overall preference. It's basically the gut reaction for the subject to find the most pleasing, and whether the soundtrack matches with the video track. And this is the user interface for for rating. So each bar of each attribute is numbered between 1 and 3, represents the number of each format. And you can just drag the bar within the range to give the score for each attribute of each version. And with the highest score being 1 on the right and left score, lowest score on the left. And this is the result. And we were able to invite 46 test subjects to the test. 33 of them are audio professionals with average of almost 24 years of experience. And we also have a pretty good combination of sound supervisors, mixers, designers, engineers. And the male to female ratio is about 80 to 20. And out of the 33 audio professional subjects, we collect 222 answers. And the figure on the top shows the average score of their rating. And we can see that the trend is 5-1 being the best in Ambidio and stereo for all 4 attributes. And the statistic significance is calculated based on a alpha level of 0.05. And you can see that the audio professionals feel Ambidio performs significantly better in immersiveness and source definition, which is exactly Ambidio attempt to improve over stereo. And there's also no significant difference between all the 10 clips. And we also count the number of times that audio professional subjects rate Ambidio higher than 5-1 or stereo. You can see that a majority of audio professional test subject rate Ambidio higher than stereo in all attributes. And for the non-audio professional subjects, we collect 89 answers from 13 subjects. And here's the average scores. You can see the trend is actually Ambidio being the highest, and then stereo, and then 5-1, except the anchor-centered dialogue attribute. And also the subject rate Ambidio significantly higher than the 5-1 version. And similarly, we also count the number of times that Ambidio being rated higher than either 5-1 or stereo. And similar to the average score, Ambidio is rated higher in immersiveness, source definition, and preference than both 5-1 and stereo. So a brief summary of this test. Ambidio is rated higher than stereo in most of the attributes, especially for the immersiveness and source definition. And whether it's from audio professionals or non-audio professionals. And for the more advanced attributes like anchor-centered dialogue that might require professional trainings, it might be hard for the general audience to tell the difference. And so the scores from the non-audio professionals are basically the same in that category. And we also did 2 separate subjective tests to emulate the everyday listening setup. So for both tests, we asked the subject to listen to the video clips on a MacBook Pro with the sound playback from the internal speakers. And for the first test, we have 5 clips with Ambidio and stereo versions and in randomized orders. And also the formats are also randomized. And the test subjects are asked to pick the better version out of the 2, both in preference and immersion. And 44 subjects participate in the test. You can see that almost all the subjects pick Ambidio over stereo. And the second test on the laptop, there are 4 clips, also in Ambidio and stereo versions, but only one of the version will be shown for each clip. And the subjects are asked to provide a rating between 1 to 10 stars, and also guess the running time by giving an estimated upper bound and lower bound. And then we take the average of the upper bound and lower bound as their estimated perceived time. And this is under an assumption that if the viewer is more engaged, you will perceive the time shorter. So 45 people participate in the test, and they give Ambidio 1 star more than stereo in rating, and then the perceived time is also shorter. And the time is normalized by the original length of the clip. So you can see that, especially in everyday setup, Ambidio can perform better, and is a good alternative to the regular stereo stream that we've been producing and delivering to the audience. So what do we do to create this immersive stereo format? So before I send it to Steve, I would like to introduce the Ambidio Looking Glass. It's an authoring tool that we use to create all the clips in our tests. And it can be used as a Pro Tools plugin, and it is designed to minimize the impact of the production workflow. And it has just won the honorable mention of HBA Engineering Excellence Award. And it supports stereo, quad, 5051, 7071 channel formats, and the user interface will adapt based on the input. And this is a screenshot of a Ambidio Looking Glass with 7.1 input. And you can see that the interface somewhat emulates the UI of a traditional down mixer that the mixers use all the time to create stereo format. And with the width parameter to control each stereo pair. So I'll hand the stage over to Steve, and he will discuss how they have been using Ambidio Looking Glass in Skywalker.
Thank you, Pei-Lun, and good afternoon. So now let's talk about how we made different clips for the listening test. We used many different types of content for the clips that we produced for this. In this diagram, a traditional stereo left-right audio soundtrack, also called a master, can be made by 2 methods. The surround stems can be downmixed to stereo stems, which can then be downmixed to a stereo composite master. Or, separately, the surround master can be downmixed directly to a stereo master. The approach that uses the individual stems allows the mixing process or mixing person to make different mixing decisions based on audio content contained in the stems. One example of how this might affect the stereo downmix would be the case that the 7.1 music stem can frequently only have audio in the side surrounds. Because of this, you would not necessarily drop the surround stems in the summation by 3 dB, but maybe by a lesser amount in 3 dB or not at all. In the case where the sound effects might have coherent audio in all 4 surrounds, such as an explosion, you would generally make the sound decision on the downmix for this type of audio stem, and in case, lower the sound effects summation by 3 dB or more. This would also be true in an Ambidio downmix with the flexibility of also deciding how wide or immersive the sounds are on a per stem basis for the Ambidio stereo master. Let's take a closer look. As can be seen in this diagram, the Ambidio process is essentially the same as a typical stereo downmix. All types of downmixing to the stereo left-right are possible with the added step of passing the audio through the Ambidio Looking Glass technology. An Ambidio encoded soundtrack can be created from a stereo master, the stereo stems, the surround master, or the surround stems. The primary difference is more data, meaning the more discrete channels that you start with, the more creative control you will have on the Ambidio soundtrack, just as there is with traditional left-only, right-only stereo masters. So let's take a closer look at a few of those workflows. So firstly, to start with the most basic, here is a typical signal flow for converting a stereo left-right soundtrack to an Ambidio left-right soundtrack. In addition to the input and output gain, the primary immersive control the operator would have is the width control. This can either be set as a static parameter applied to the entire track, or it can be manually changed in real time with the program audio and saved as metadata with the Looking Glass plugin. So let's take a look at an example of this in Pro Tools. You start with a stereo track of audio. That track would be routed to a stereo bus that would then feed the final stereo output that the stereo master is derived from. And then the next step, per the previous diagram, to pass the audio through the Ambidio Looking Glass AAX plugin as an insert on that bus. In this example, which is a single stereo input, besides the usual gain control and metering, there's a primary overall width control, which is the semicircle at the bottom of the plugin, and currently indicates maximum width. You'll also see an associated filter curve that indicates what audio frequencies the Ambidio process is applied to. I have the ability to decide how much of the audio spectrum in the soundtrack that the immersive encode process will affect. Both width and spectrum parameters gives me full control over how much the sound will be encoded as an immersive in the final stereo output. Okay, my next example, in this diagram, we will take a look at using the surround master as the source for the Ambidio immersive encoding. The primary difference here between the stereo master workflow we just looked at is that the Looking Glass plugin gives us individual control over the width for all 3 stereo pairs in the 7.1 soundtrack. Please note that center channel and LFE are passed through the process and are only used for analysis. The Pro Tools setup is similar, this time starting with a 7.1 audio track. The 7.1 audio track is routed to a 7.1 audio bus, and then routed through the Looking Glass plugin that's inserted into this bus. In this example, I can change the width controls for the front channels, the side surround channels, and the rear surround channels separately, allowing me to preserve the original intent of the surround mix. As can be seen from the interface, the center and LFE channels are passed through without any immersive processing, but does allow me to gain control over their individual down mixes you would find in a typical down mix plugin. This example is showing the width to be in a narrow setting in the front left-right channels, meaning it is not deriving much immersiveness from the front left-right channels and keeping the focus of the audio in front of the listener. In the same 7.1 example, I'm showing the side surround tab being set somewhat wider than the front to better represent their position in the immersively encoded stereo master. And then lastly, the rear surrounds have the greatest width applied. All of this allows me to represent the original intent of the surround mix. We are not looking to create a new immersive mix, but to better represent a surround mix on a typical stereo speakers or stereo devices. Again, as in the stereo example, all of this metadata can be recorded in real time and does not have to be static. The third technique I will cover today is using the surround stems as a source. Just as creating a traditional stereo master, having the ability to control the stems individually on a channel-by-channel basis gives the most creative control. Ambidio Looking Glass gives the added control of width to each of the stem's internal stereo pairs, in addition to the typical downmix gain parameters. You will also note from this diagram that we've coined the term LARA or LARA for an Ambidio stereo master to differentiate it from a left-only, right-only stereo master, also known as LORO. Okay, this time we start from 3 7.1 tracks containing the stems. As is typical, the dialogue, the music, and the sound effects. In the world of Atmos, these could be 7.1 renders of the Atmos stems, as was the case in some of our test clips. Similar to the other examples, these are then routed to 3 processing buses with 3 instances of the Looking Glass plugin as inserts. This allows discrete control over level and width for all 3 stereo pairs and all 3 stems to create the composite and Ambidio LARA master. This allows the mixer much more control in how the original surround sound audio track can be re-represented as an Ambidio encoded stereo audio. So on to workflow evaluation. Next, we will start with the user's feedback. Short learning integration time. This is very similar to traditional stereo downmixing workflows, with the addition of the width control for the stereo pairs. Static versus dynamic settings. The Ambidio process allows for static settings, but also allows for dynamic changes based on specific content. One example of this is to not process the front left-right of a 5.1 soundtrack at all, except for in certain scenes. As an example, maybe focusing on scenes with more reverb that would allow for more immersive effect for that particular scene. Mixing times do not change, but it does allow for room for more creativity. The process for creating an Ambidio stereo track is essentially the same as a traditional stereo track, using tools, and can be done with any source, whether it is composite master or individual stems, but also allows the mixer to preserve the original intent of the soundtrack's immersiveness. Now for some of the objective measurements, print times are faster than real time. Once the control metadata is set, the master file can be output in faster than real time. File sizes do not change under the same compression parameters. The Ambidio master, albeit encoded audio, is still a PCM audio file with the same length as the original and does not differ in size from traditional stereo audio file. Therefore, compressed versions would also be the same. Loudness changes within the dB. The Ambidio process will have an overall effect on measured loudness differing from the source content, but does not exceed plus or minus 1 decibel. Thank you. And if you guys have any questions,
Excellent.
we have about 5 minutes.
So I'm going to ask that if you have a question to please step up to the mic so it can be noted.
Rod Evenson is the name. Any tests between loudspeakers versus headphones?
You want me to field that one? In terms of Ambidio, the process is designed for speakers. And the concept is you have 2 speakers and both ears are able to hear those speakers simultaneously. Regarding headphones, with all the testing we've done, it doesn't necessarily have the same effect as you're going to get with speakers, but it doesn't have a negative effect to the overall stereo soundtracks, meaning that you'll listen to it as if it was in stereo. If you wanted to go for something different on the headphone version, then you would probably investigate binaural or some other aspect of binaural.
Additional questions? Anybody? Yes? Oh, come on, Brian. You can run over there. I know you can.
Hi, Brian Besser from Sony Pictures. Steve, you mentioned about the workflow from Atmos. Do you need to downmix each of the Atmos stems through the RMU to a stereo pair prior to getting into the Ambidio, or do you mix it to 7.1? How do you do it?
In our case, what we found was that we would render 7.1 stems mainly because that gives us 4 discrete surrounds that we can adjust differently, and also it gives us the ability to adjust the stems differently from each other, which we did find essentially we would make different setting differences on the width controls for the surrounds based on the stems themselves.
And the height information that would be contained in the Atmos, that really doesn't get represented in Ambidio, right? It's just the left, right, and the surround information, not the height?
Right. So yeah, we're folding the height down into the 7.1.
Right. So you do a fold down of the height down into a 7.1, and then you, okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank
the
you.
main aspect of that, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, gentlemen.